Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about the N-Gage port of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Don't worry, I'll catch you up to speed before we get into the technical details. So, let's make sure we're all on the same page here. Does everyone know who Tony Hawk is? I'm assuming everyone. Just in case you don't, he did a lot of spins, and he went very high up in the air. It was very impressive. Cue some spinny Tony Hawk footage going on. So Tony Hawk was a big deal, especially like in the 90s. I think we all know who he is. So, moving on, we got Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Probably, again, at the time, one of the biggest video game series, and especially like those first couple ones, super good games. Now, what we might need a little bit more of a lore recap on is what an N-Gage is. And I wouldn't blame you if you didn't know what this was. So let's start with that. The N-Gage is some sort of cell phone game system hybrid made by Nokia, which, primarily is in like the cell phone business. So it's like, I don't know if it was primarily supposed to be a game system first and then a cell phone, which I think is what the marketing was trying to push it as. Be like, hey, Game Boy Advance exists, but what about calling people? What about that? The Game Boy Advance can't do that. Like, I don't know anybody that's ever wanted that with their portable game console, but that's what Nokia thought. So, it's, granted, the hardware itself isn't too shabby, at least as far as the time period and running off of a battery. It's more impressive than you may think, and you'll be seeing that here in a minute. So, this was released in 2003, and it does actually have capabilities of 3D graphics, and they're not bad. One thing I will say is the screen resolution is baffling. Not necessarily just raw resolution, but the orientation of it and how squishy it is. It's very tall and skinny, and it does not make for a good viewing field, but I can't go back in time and tell Nokia not to do that, so we'll have to put up with it for now. The other thing I really like about this thing is the fact that on the original models, in order to change out like your game cartridge, you had to like remove the battery, so essentially entirely turn the system off and then change your game out. I can't think of another singular portable console that you'd have to remove the entire battery to put in your game cartridge. That's hilarious, but also, product of its times, things were different, things were weirder. But still, like, if you look at, like, the functionality of a Game Boy Advance, put in the cartridge, you play your game, you can take the cartridge out without removing the battery. Just somebody should have stepped in somewhere, but this isn't necessarily a critique on the N-Gage as a functional device. So, the other thing we want to talk about with this is the buttons. Now, because of how I got footage for this, I don't have to succumb myself to using Nokia N-Gage buttons. However, for people that actually have the system, it's essentially just like a numpad on a cell phone. Would you call it a number pad? I think you would. Yeah, so it's like the number pad on the cell phone. That's your buttons. Now, there's like a D-pad kind of, but your buttons are just literally cell phone buttons. So that's horrific. I couldn't actually imagine playing Tony Hawk like that. But one day, if I can pour some YouTube money into that, I will get one, and I will try to get footage of it. But for now, unfortunately, we have to go with pure emulation for the N-Gage side of things, which is something on this channel I try to completely avoid. All the footage you're going to see besides N-Gage is going to be real hardware, but there's nothing I can do to get around with it. On the flip side, because of this limitation, I got to play the entire game with a Series X controller. So much better, I can imagine, than trying to use actual N-Gage buttons. So, that's what the N-Gage was. It was a 2003 Nokia device, and what I want you to guess, if you're not super aware of the N-Gage, like, I wasn't until maybe like a year or two ago, how much do you think this thing would have sold? Like, maybe 10,000 units, maybe 100,000 if you're like really lucky. See, that's what I would think, and then I'll put it up on screen now, the actual sales numbers. It's like 3 million. 3 million of these weird cell phone consoles were sold. I don't understand how. My only guess is that either these numbers are overinflated by Nokia, because I swear I watched some video or something where they said the numbers on Wikipedia might not be super accurate because they might be coming from Nokia somehow, or this was a bunch of consoles that were bought and sold, say like at a GameStop or something where they're trying to get rid of stock and maybe selling them for like $20 or something, like get them out of the store, they're taking up space. It could be a combination of those two things, but I still can't believe that this unit sold 3 million. That just means I'm going to get one at some point. Don't worry, I'll get my hands on this. So, now that we got the N-Gage out of the way with, now let's talk about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater itself. Now, we're not going to go super long into this, but more so the technical side of things and the release date side of things. That way we have a period-specific framing and understanding of what was going on with Pro Skater 1 and some of 2 at the time. That way we are coming at this from the perspective of early 2000s, not modern-day stuff. So, show of hands. How many people played that Pizza Hut demo of Pro Skater 1? I know I did. I think that was my first experience with the game, and I think it even had, like, split screen for that demo as well. Maybe I'll look into those Pizza Hut demos at some point. That'd be a very interesting topic to talk about. So, Pro Skater 1 on the PS1 came out in 1999, and then the N64 port later came out in 2000, and those are going to be the relevant versions for what we're talking about today. Because what we're going to be using as the baseline footage of what you're going to be seeing is the N64 version. And the reason I picked that is because the PS1 version is a little rougher and a little older, and the Dreamcast version is too nice. It's like 480p. So N64 is a very good middle ground, especially for like the time period of it, since it came out like in 2000 instead of 99. It was developed by Edge of Reality. We're not necessarily talking about the N64 port. I will at some point, because these ports are fascinating, like specifically the N64 ones of 1 through 3. But it's less aliased because, both because of the built-in anti-aliasing of the N64 and just the fact that the N64 is better suited for these types of 3D graphics. It's a little bit of a smoother image, a little bit of a softer image. However, like I said, it's not like radically better like the Dreamcast version, so I was figuring the middle ground is the best place we can start with. So, it's 240p. It's, like I said, unlike the PS1 version, it's kind of smoothed out. It's kind of a little more easy on the eyes. In my opinion, I know some people like the more aliased look of the PS1, which is like totally understandable, but for the purposes of this video, it makes more sense, I think, to go with the middle ground option. So 240p, it's a little smoothed out, frame rate stable, 30. However, I don't know if that's just because of the expansion pack. I don't know how this runs without it. Maybe it would be a little less stable. And one thing you're going to notice is a ton of crashing and a ton of screwing up. I don't have any way right now to split my RGB SCART stuff, so I'm playing this through OBS with like enabling the buffering so I stop getting so many frame drops on my capture, and I swear there's like maybe like a 2 to 3 second or so input lag, and I mean full second. Like, not millisecond. It was absurd. I'll figure out something better for that later, but for the purposes of the video, you can at least see it visually. I just hope you like looking at the ground a lot. You'll at least get a very good understanding of what the ground looks like in the N64 version of Pro Skater 1. So, the reason I'm showing you footage of the N64 version or any other version is because I want you to have a baseline understanding of what this game like normally looks like. That way you don't go into the N-Gage port thinking it's either better or worse in any way, shape, or form just because maybe you don't remember how the game looks exactly, which is like totally cool. I know not everybody constantly goes back to play the older stuff, so it might not be as fresh in your head what it actually looks like. So what we're using here, what I'm using here is an N64 through an RGB SCART cable to an RGB modded N64, and running that through an OSSC with like some light scan lines. Now, the scan lines don't work super well when it comes to capturing it through OBS, but it's still kind of better than not having it. That way we can at least somewhat see what this is supposed to kind of look like, say, like on a CRT, as much as I'd like to just take every one of you and be like, alright, we're looking at my CRT. This is how this game looks. Unfortunately, that's not possible. Also, that would be highly against the law. I cannot kidnap people to show them how Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and the N64 looks like on a CRT. That would get me in a lot of trouble. So we can't do that. Alright, enough nonsense. Now we're all on the same page. Now we're going to get to the most exciting part of this video. The N-Gage port of Pro Skater 1. Cue like cool music and stuff like that. We're not actually doing that, but just like pretend that I have good editing skills. Remember, this is all just me and Windows Movie Maker. Oh yeah. So, when I was going into this, I was expecting probably the worst. Like, I'm like, this is going to be the worst version of Pro Skater, and I wish I could compare it to, playing on an actual N-Gage, but I have both the benefit and the unfortunate reality of not having an N-Gage, so I don't know how it plays on an N-Gage. So there's a couple of caveats when it comes to how I'm presenting the footage. So obviously, I'm assuming that just the actual N-Gage screen would make this look the best and the most accurate to how it really should be looking, but there's no way to really quantifiably mimic that through emulation and stuff like that. So while the aspect ratio is correct, obviously, like, it's getting way blown up to like a 1440 display on my monitor or whatever I'm recording it at and stuff. So the game on an actual system probably wouldn't look nearly this pixelated and stuff, but that's just, there's not much I could do with that unless I also just shrunk the image like a lot, but then that would make for like a really unpleasant viewing experience, and also just for me playing it, I don't really want to play in a super small window. If I'm doing stuff like this, I want the aspect ratio to be correct. Other than that, we'll deal with, kind of blowing up the pixels. I mean, it's an N-Gage game. What do you want me to do? So, while I would like to tell you how hard this is to play on N-Gage buttons, I cannot do that. So we're gonna talk about this on the merits of it as a game and how I could reasonably expect that this would look on a smaller screen. So, is that fair? Can we go with that? Alright, so one of the first things that I noticed, and you also may have already noticed this with the N64 footage, I muted the music, but yeah, so I went to go test this out for a bit before I started recording footage, and it has, like, all the music in it still. It's already kind of impressive enough that that's still chopped up and still in the N64 port, even though it's like 16 megabytes. They didn't even use that large of an N64 cartridge for that. But yeah, no, this still has, like, as far as I was hearing, it still has, like, all the music and stuff. I didn't listen for that long because I'm just like, I'm going to mute this, but it still has the music. Now, I'm not saying it's good quality or anything like that, but it's just impressive of the fact that it's still even here. So, before we get too far into it, I want you to know the time period. And here's the strange part. This was 2003, and at this point, I'll throw up some pictures right here. Pro Skater 2 was already out on like everything that it was going to be out on, besides like Xbox and like iPhone. So we've already had a taste of what Pro Skater 2 was at this point, and even then it was like 2 years, 3 years after the fact, depending on what version you're playing. So I feel like that already puts us in a weird spot. Like, why Pro Skater 1 and not Pro Skater 2 at this point? Like, I'm sure they have their reasons, but Pro Skater 2 is just, like, even more well-regarded and considered, like, one of the best video games of all time. And it's not like the game was on more powerful hardware or something, but still on, like, all the same consoles it already was. So, I'm sure they had a reason. Who knows what it is? Who knows if this was the right idea? Maybe portable 3D Pro Skater 2 would have saved the N-Gage. Granted, I can't look into alternate universes, so I can't give you the answer to that. You can speculate, maybe write like a fan fiction on that. I would love to read it. So, it's Pro Skater 1 from 2003, and this port was developed by this company called IdeaWorks Game Studio. So, looking into them a little bit, because that's something I always like to do to see what, like, especially when it comes to porting stuff, like what company was doing it and what other things they have done. So, it looks like most of their catalog has been other N-Gage ports and iPhone games, so it really makes sense why they were picked to do this. And granted, this was it looks like one of their first projects that they've ever done, and honestly, these dudes were nuts. As far as, at least, like, I can only come at this from the Pro Skater 1 port, but I am, like, so shocked with how good this port is. So, let's get into it. Now we know the studio behind it, we know the time period. Let's really start talking about this port from like a graphical standpoint, from a gameplay standpoint. So one thing, again, I meant to bring this up a little bit earlier, is the fact that it's kind of running at like 60 FPS, kind of, but I think that's just due to the emulator and it being set like that. So I wasn't going to lower it just in case I was wrong and maybe the N-Gage port actually was 60, but I'm assuming it's probably still 30, just like the normal console versions. So just because this game's running so like smoothly, I would assume the N-Gage version's like half that frame rate, but so is the PS1 version, the N64 version, the Dreamcast version. I don't think the Dreamcast versions were 60. I think those were still 30, just 40p. So, not only does this have all of the same content as the original version, there's also more. There's actually like 4 more levels that aren't even in the original version, and we'll get to those later. For now, we're just going to talk about it level to level in the career mode. Shockingly, it's all here, all of the goals. I don't think any like the point values or anything are different. I didn't do 2 back-to-back playthroughs to see for myself for sure or anything, though. But they all seemed like roughly the same point values and stuff as far as high scores and stuff are concerned. And all the normal levels in this game, like all the level layouts and stuff, are exactly the same. Like nothing's cut out. Like maybe the distance is a little less visible and stuff as far as like LOD is concerned compared to the original versions. So that kind of already blew me away. Like, all these levels are just exactly how you know they're like. So when I'm playing this, and like I said, I'm not using a cell phone pad to do it, unfortunately. I was using like an Xbox controller. But when I'm playing this, it's just like, okay, this is Pro Skater. I know how to play this. I know what the level layouts are like. I know where most of the goals and stuff are at. You can just like kind of play it without thinking too hard about it. And so as far as like pure gameplay is concerned, like regardless of maybe an FPS discrepancy, it plays literally just like Pro Skater, and like it doesn't feel like the engine got wonky or anything, or like they mishandled the handling of it at all. I feel like a lot of this is probably just ripped straight from the source code because it actually just feels like Pro Skater. It's not like, to me, like if we're talking about like say Pro Skater 2, like that Xbox port made by Treyarch, super technically impressive and stuff, and I'll talk about that one day because it is really interesting. I feel like the physics got a little messed up with that version, and then, not that it's like a straight port or anything, but think about stuff like Pro Skater HD and how bad those feel. Like, it's not a case like that where it's like something's off. It's like, this feels really good. All the physics and stuff just feel like Pro Skater. So, you know, we go through all the same levels. We still got the competitions. I wish I could play the music because that would feel way more like Pro Skater, but you know how it is. I can't do that on YouTube. So it's all just Pro Skater 1, and you can play through the entire career mode. You can still unlock, can I say Officer such and such's name? Maybe not back-to-back that sentence. I'm going to just avoid that, but you know what I'm talking about. So you can still unlock a character. You can do all the goals. You can play through with everyone. One thing I couldn't really test out is this did have multiplayer, so you could probably still do, like, well, not split screen stuff, but still do some multiplayer stuff, probably. I'm assuming they wouldn't have skimped out there, and it probably still has like graffiti and stuff, but I cannot say for sure. Maybe I can see if I can set this up through the emulation stuff at some point, or even better yet, maybe in the future, I'll get 2 N-Gages and 2 copies of Pro Skater 1 on it. Then we'll really be having a good video. If I ever get my hands on an N-Gage, I will make an update video to this. I swear. So, yeah, it's still got the multiplayer options. It's got all the career modes. It's got free skate. It's got single session, which I did for a bit after I completed it. So, you know, I played through the entire career mode, and I think at some point, and you can check out my second channel for whenever I get around to this, I'm probably going to stream this, and then you can see it more from an unedited point of view. Because it is really fun to play through, and I do want to play through more of this version. So, play through the entire career mode, but like that's not it. So, here's what's super exciting about this. Like I said, all the levels are the same, all the goals and stuff are the same. You can still unlock a character and stuff, but what makes this version really nutty is the fact that it has 4 additional levels from Pro Skater 2. So, we have New York, we have Venice, we have Philly, and we have the Hangar. So, what makes these so interesting, now, they're not available in career mode, there's no goals attached to them. That would have been really sweet, like maybe, I don't know, make more like Pro Skater 1 oriented type of goals. for the Pro Skater 2 levels, but they didn't go that far, but I can't really hold that against them. Bonus content is bonus content, and this port's already really good and like fully featured. So the layouts of the levels aren't exactly normal. So if you back in the day and stuff, you did some split screen with your siblings or your friends or whatever, you may know that like some of these levels, especially like I think it's more noticeable in Pro Skater 2, some of the levels are like shrunk down and cut off, obviously due to hardware limitations and making sure everything's still stable in split screen. And right now I don't have back-to-back comparisons for the split screen and Pro Skater 2 to see if these are the exact same layouts, but I have a hunch that they probably are. And the reason I'm saying that is I wouldn't be surprised if these are literally the same level files from Pro Skater 2, and my reason for guessing that is these levels are actually separate level files in the data, if I'm remembering correctly. Now, I'm not trying to spread misinformation, but I'm pretty sure how it works in Pro Skater 2 is when you do like the split screen stuff, that what it's loading is actually separate level data. It's not just like a quick on the fly editing of a one player level. I'm pretty sure with like game share codes and stuff that you could load into these versions in single player. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were able to just get that data straight from Neversoft and just use those versions of the level. Now, why they did that, I don't really know, and maybe this could answer why they wouldn't have done Pro Skater 2. Maybe they really, really are pushing the N-Gage with what they're doing here, and they simply couldn't handle even single-player versions of the Pro Skater 2 levels, like, fully, and they had to use the cut-down split-screen versions. I don't really see why that would be the case, but I don't think this was done accidentally. There's kind of no way they would do that. You would notice something's up when you're just playing the level, and you'd be like, hey, what's up with this? This isn't the normal version of the Pro Skater 2 level. So this is probably an intentional design choice. I wish I could tell you why, but as you probably know, there isn't a ton of information about this port online, besides, people just playing it and talking about it. There's not going to be a developer interview with them saying, this is the exact reason why we're using the split screen versions of the Pro Skater 2 levels. So, it's those versions, and you can do them in Free Skate single session. I'm assuming the multiplayer as well. I'd be surprised if you couldn't do them there, but again, I can't exactly speak for that. So, I did a couple of runs of single session just trying to get high scores in these levels, and what makes this so fun, and this is why I highly implore you to go play this version for yourself after you're done watching this video, is that obviously you're doing all these levels with Pro Skater 1 physics. You're not getting any manuals. Things are a little more strict and a little less floaty, and it's just a completely different feel. One thing I noticed, and I don't know if this is something that they themselves did while porting, or if it's just a consequence of the Pro Skater 1 engine, which again, that means they backported Pro Skater 2 levels into the Pro Skater 1 engine, even if it's modified for the N-Gage, is that, so, do you know that that area that's in Philly, where you have like a bunch of little squares next to each other with some plants and stuff like that? I'm describing this horribly, but it's going to be in the footage, where you can just like hold the grind button and you just go. I'm sure a lot of people, even that if you haven't played the original version, you probably played 1+2. So it's a version like in both 1+2 and the originals, you can just like keep grinding, and you can just like build up a huge multiplier. Wow, sorry. I think I really just want to play the N-Gage version with the bros, you know what I mean? So instead of being able to just hold grind and just go through all these things, rack up your multiplier, all the rails are like, they kind of just stop. So they turn you like immediately once you're done, and you kind of just go off of it. So unless you like did a perfect combination of like ollieing and grinding, which would still be very hard because you got to remember Pro Skater 1 has no balance meter. It's just, you kind of just hope. And also, these ledges weren't designed for that in mind. They were designed to just hold grind and just go through the whole thing. There's little quirks like that, and I'm sure there would be more that I could find when I go back to play this more, because I'm going to play this more. This is surprisingly fun, especially these Pro Skater 2 levels, where like, I don't know if it's a consequence of Pro Skater 1 physics, or just something happening while they're porting it, or they intentionally did it, which if they did that, they were wrong to do that. But again, I don't see why they would do that. So there's little interesting quirks like that. And so for like the hangar, there's no outside area anymore. For Philly, there's the whole skate park area. You know, arguably, probably the best and most iconic part of the level, at least to me. It's not there anymore. For Venice, you're missing like half the beach area. Well, it's not the beach, but like the back area. One thing I noticed though, so I don't know again if this was originally there or not, but there's still some stuff out of bounds that would have been in bounds if this was like the normal version of the level. Like you can see Ollie the Magic Bum like off like off into the beach area where he normally would be if that part of the level was still like solid and normal skating ground. So there's still some weird stuff like that going on. And New York probably got it the worst. It's missing the entire back area. You cannot go up and grind down into it or anything like that. It's just permanently fenced off. So you only get like the ground level behind the brick wall sort of stuff, and like that's it. Like you're missing a huge chunk of it. But again, I'm not saying all this to say that these versions of the levels aren't cool to play. This just makes it way more fascinating. It's way more fun to see some versions of these that are a lot different rather than just being the same again. Because as cool as it already is to do Pro Skater 1 levels or Pro Skater 2 levels with the Pro Skater 1 physics, it's even cooler that they're also kind of different and more like the split screen versions. And I know I've probably been going in circles a bit with that. It's just that this was the most exciting part of the N-Gage version to me. When I was going into this, I thought there was like one Pro Skater 1 level, and I'm like, wow, I keep saying that. One Pro Skater 2 level. But no, there's 4 of them. So what I really want you guys, I want you, like when you're done with this, to go play it, play through the career mode, you know, hook up a normal controller, play it kind of normally, and then especially when you're done, check out the Pro Skater 2 levels. It's super cool. It's super cool to play it like this. So I know I talked a lot about the gameplay and I talked about the levels and stuff like that. Let me talk a little bit now about like just the technical side of it. So, like I said, unfortunately, I have to make some assumptions. I'm going to assume that this was 30 FPS on the actual N-Gage. However, graphically speaking, you know, keep in mind that we're stretching it out on modern digital displays and stuff like that. This version, besides the weird squished in resolution, which is like more screen ratio, but obviously that has something to do with the resolution as well. Besides the weird squished in resolution, this game looks like really good. It still definitely looks like Pro Skater. Like, it's the worst looking version of it, and I don't even think that's down to the fact that it's a low squished in resolution. It just, there's definitely some stuff that's more pared back, more cut back. But again, if you were looking at this on a small portable screen, especially in 2003, I would have said like, hey, this is amazing. This is really cool. Like, it still has like its visual identity of being Pro Skater. And if anything, maybe more so like the PS1 version of it, you know, way more aliased. I doubt there was any anti-aliasing going on with the N-Gage for anything. I doubt it would even have the tiniest bit of resources left for any form of super simple anti-aliasing. I don't see it happening. But, you know, again, like what I want you to take away from this is not the fact that I'm stretching it out and you're seeing it blown up on your TV or your phone or whatever you're watching else. Just, again, N-Gage screen was small and was meant for these low resolutions. And when you think about it in that perspective, this actually does look really good. Now, like I said, it's squished in, and the squished in part of it is weird. This, like, it's tall, but it's very skinny. And sometimes it makes things very weird perspective-wise when you're trying to just like skate through the levels and stuff. Like, you feel like you just can't see much to the left or right of you. But you kind of, after playing it for a while, you kind of grow accustomed to it and you kind of get used to it. And it doesn't become that big of a deal. I wish there was maybe some sort of widescreen hack or something that you could do with this just to get a little more field of view. And the reason I'm even saying that, and again, that doesn't have to do with how the N-Gage version actually is, which to me, while it's incredibly baffling, it is super impressive, and it makes me, like, this is like the sole reason why I want to get an N-Gage one day. I want to play this on real hardware. That's my whole shtick for everything. I want real hardware for just everything, and I need to play this on the N-Gage so badly. So, like, when it comes down to content, considering this plays like exactly how it should and how you remember it feeling, this kind of is like the best version of Pro Skater 1. And this is not what I was expecting when I was going into this. I thought, like I said, I thought this was going to be like the worst version by far. Like, it's going to be dumb cell phone version of Pro Skater 1. But that is like so not the case with this. Like, genuinely, IdeaWorks Game Studio did an insane job with this port and kind of went above and beyond what they probably even needed to with like the extra Pro Skater 2 levels. I really wish this version was ported to something that wasn't the N-Gage, because this is kind of just like the best version to play. And I'd love to be able to like hook this up to something and do some split screen with it or something and play the Pro Skater 2 levels with the Pro Skater 1 physics with some split screen like on like a CRT or something. I think that would be incredible. Or even if this just got like a modern port to like Steam or something, because I know sometimes this is only really a Japanese thing, but like there's that whole Gmod archives thing, and I have like one shmup game that was like only on cell phone and 360 like that on Steam. Not that they would have any reason to touch something like this, but even if this was just like a straight port to Steam, maybe with like functioning multiplayer, that would be so cool, because this version is so fun to play, and it's kind of the most content rich version of this in an extent. And I know this is a crazy thing to say, but like it is kind of the best version of Pro Skater, and it's stuck on the N-Gage. For as weird and cool and kind of impressive the N-Gage is, it's not what I want to bust out to play some Pro Skater, and especially if I had to use cell phone buttons to do it. I really wish I could just like play this on a TV or play this normally through Steam or something and do some multiplayer with it, because it's so cool. I wish these games weren't stuck in like licensing purgatory, and I was going to use a little harsher word, but purgatory kind of works too. Like, these games would be like, they're so due for some sort of collection or re-releases or remasters or something, and this could be the perfect dumb little bonus thing that you could throw in and be like, hey, check out this weird cell phone port of Pro Skater, or if you want to call the N-Gage a game console, I don't know what you want to call it, because it's also kind of a cell phone, but be like, alright, get like Pro Skater 1 through 4 or something, and then here's also the N-Gage version of Pro Skater 1 as like a bonus or something. I definitely think this is something that like Tony Hawk fans would want to check out. I mean, like Pro Skater fans, like video game fans, maybe not people that are just into Tony Hawk. I don't know why you'd want to play this specifically, but I feel like this is something a lot of fans would really like to get their hands on, really like to play in like a reasonable fashion, because it is so unique and different and weird. And like, this was like the one version of Pro Skater that I never played before starting this video and doing research for it and getting footage and stuff. Like, and I guarantee that's the case for a lot of people out there. This version's genuinely very cool, very technically impressive, again, for like the type of hardware that it was on, and playing this with like a normal controller, it's a lot of fun, and it really is kind of the best version of Pro Skater. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This was a lot of fun to get all the footage of. After a while, I was just playing Pro Skater just to play some Pro Skater. It wasn't even about making the video anymore. I really just wanted to play more of this version. And honestly, when I'm done recording this, I'm probably going to be playing more of this version. It's very, very cool. So what I want you to do is, when you're done with this, I know you can figure it out and stuff. Like, check out this version for a little bit, and like leave a comment what you think of it and stuff like that. So this was a lot of work to do. This is honestly probably the most work I put into a video so far, because I want it to be like the best thing I could do, because this weird port really deserves a good video. So if you've enjoyed what you've watched, I'm going to be doing a lot more of this. We'll look at, like I said, like the N64 ports of Pro Skater 1 through 3, and eventually the Xbox port of Pro Skater 2, along with other franchises. I'm going to make sure I don't like hunker down and do too many of the same things back to back. I'm going to spread it out and change it up and stuff like that. So like the video, it helps me a lot to let me know that you enjoy what I'm doing. Comment, obviously. Let me know what you think of this version, or if you think this version's total garbage, let me know that too. And then subscribe if you want to see more weird ports and stuff, because this is what this channel's all about. Talk about weird ports, weird games, just that kind of stuff. So, with that being said, hope you enjoy the video, and I will see you guys later.